started with Max's dare. "Come on, Ian. It's just a game," he said, grinning as he set the board on the table. The thing looked ancient, the edges frayed like it had been passed around for decades. The letters were faded, the word goodbye almost illegible, and the planchette looked like it had seen too many shaky hands. There were 5 of us: me, Max, Leah, Olivia, and Nate. We were at Max's family's cabin, miles from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by thick woods, the perfect place for a dumb horror cliché. "Okay, rules," Olivia said, her tone mock serious. "No letting go of the planchette. Always say goodbye. And no mocking the spirits." I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, because ghosts care about our etiquette." We lit a few candles, turned off the lights, and placed our hands on the planchette. "Is anyone here?" Max asked in a deep, theatrical voice. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just silence and the sound of the wind scraping branches against the cabin walls. Then the planchette moved. I snorted. "Real original, Max." "It's not me," Max snapped. The planchette spelled out, "Why yes." We all froze. The room was thick with tension, the kind that made every sound feel amplified. The wind outside? Louder. The creak of the old cabin? Deafening. My pulse thudded in my ears as if trying to warn me to stop. "Who's moving it?" Leah hissed, her wide eyes darting between us. "It's not me," Olivia whispered. She sounded so genuinely freaked that even I couldn't make a joke. Nate, always the skeptic, smirked. "It's probably just subconscious movement, ideomotor effect or whatever." But Max wasn't smirking anymore. His hand trembled slightly as the planchette moved again, gliding smoothly to spell MAX. A chill shot through me. Max tried to laugh it off, but it came out shaky. "Real funny, guys. No one's joking," Olivia whispered, her knuckles white against the planchette. Max swallowed hard. "Okay, if someone's here, what do you want?" The planchette paused, hovering for what felt like an eternity. Then it began to move again. "Listen." Leah's voice cracked as she asked, "Listen to what?" The answer came fast, the planchette darting to spell out the words in jagged, jerky movements. "TGWOD." We all exchanged uneasy glances. "What about the woods?" Nate pressed, still trying to act like he wasn't bothered. This time, the response was slower, deliberate. "ITCOMES." My throat went dry. "What comes?" The board was silent. The planchette didn't move. Just when I thought the session was over, the candles flickered violently, and the wind outside howled as if something had stirred it to life. Olivia's voice was barely above a whisper. "We need to say goodbye. Now." Max nodded quickly, but as we tried to move the planchette to goodbye, it resisted. It wouldn't budge. Instead, it spelled one last word, STY. "Stay." Leah's voice cracked, her fingers trembling on the planchette. "Stay for what?" "Probably for this thing to jump out and eat us," I muttered, trying to mask my unease. No one laughed, not even Nate. "Enough. We're done," Max snapped, shoving the planchette toward goodbye, with more force than necessary. This time it moved easily, like the board had suddenly decided to let us go. "Great," Olivia said, her voice tight. "Game over. Let's never do this again." But the room felt different. The air was heavy, pressing on my chest like the walls were leaning in. Outside, the wind had picked up, now howling in long, mournful wails that rattled the windows. "Is it just me, or is the wind getting worse?" Leah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll check it out," Nate said, standing up and grabbing his flashlight. He was halfway to the door when Max grabbed his arm. "Wait, don't go out there." Nate rolled his eyes. "What? You think there's a ghost waiting for me?" "I don't know what I think," Max admitted, his face pale. "But the board, it's a game." Nate cut him off. "Nothing's out there. Watch. I'll prove it." Before anyone could stop him, he yanked the door open and stepped onto the porch. The wind hit him like a wall, nearly knocking him off balance. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing the swaying trees and thick, swirling mist that seemed to have come out of nowhere. We watched from the doorway as Nate shone the light toward the edge of the woods. See? Nothing. The beam flickered, and then we heard it. A low, guttural growl, coming from somewhere deep in the trees. It wasn't an animal. It was too low, too deliberate, like the sound was meant for us. Nate froze, the flashlight shaking in his hand. What the hell was that? Get inside, Olivia hissed. Now. But Nate didn't move. His light stayed fixed on the trees, where something was moving. The shadows shifted, something large and unnatural weaving between the trunks. Nate! I yelled, my voice cracking. Then we saw it. Two eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, staring back at us. They weren't human. Too far apart, too reflective, like a predator's eyes catching the light. And they were getting closer. Nate finally snapped out of it, stumbling backward into the cabin. Max slammed the door and locked it, as if that flimsy barrier would keep out whatever was out there. What the hell was that? Nate gasped, his face pale and sweat slicked. I don't know, Max said, his voice shaking, but I think we invited it. The growling outside grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't just one creature. It sounded like there were more now, circling the cabin, their guttural snarls overlapping. The windows rattled as if something was testing their strength, and the whole place seemed to vibrate with an unnatural energy. Leah was crying, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. What did we do? What did we bring here? I don't know, Max said, pacing frantically. But we have to figure out how to stop it. Stop it. Nate snapped. How do you stop something like that? You saw those eyes. That thing isn't normal. Guys. Shut up, Olivia hissed, her eyes fixed on the Ouija board still sitting on the table. It's not over. Look, the planchette was moving. None of us were touching it, but it was gliding across the board with terrifying precision, spelling out a new message. INSID. What? I breathed, my stomach dropping like a stone. Inside, Leah whispered. Her face went pale. No, that's not possible. A loud bang came from the back of the cabin. Something had hit the door hard enough to shake the walls. We locked that, right? I asked, my voice shaking. Max nodded, his eyes wide. Of course. I locked every door. Another bang, this time from the front of the cabin. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to break in. It was taunting us, letting us know it could if it wanted to. Then came the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving across the roof. Upstairs, Olivia whispered, her eyes darting to the ceiling. We all froze, staring at the beams above us. The footsteps moved slowly, pacing back and forth. No way. Nate started, but his voice faltered. The footsteps stopped directly above us. And then, with a deafening crash, the hatch to the attic flew open, and something dropped down into the shadows. We couldn't see it, but we could hear it. Wet, labored breathing and the sound of claws scraping against the wood floor. Run! Max yelled, snapping us out of our paralysis. We bolted for the kitchen, but before we could reach it, the creature moved. It was fast, so fast that it blurred as it darted in front of us, blocking our path. It stood in the dim light of the candles, and my blood ran cold. It was tall, easily 7 feet, its body hunched and twisted. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over sharp bones, and its mouth was full of jagged teeth, grinning in a way that made my stomach turn. Its eyes were the worst, glowing, predatory, and full of malice. It let out a low growl that seemed to vibrate the air around us, and for a moment, none of us could move. Then Olivia did something I didn't expect. She grabbed the Ouija board and threw it at the creature. The board hit it square in the chest, and to my shock, it recoiled, hissing like it had been burned. Get to the door! Olivia screamed. We didn't need to be told twice. As the creature stumbled back, we made a mad dash for the front door. Max threw it open, and we ran into the night, the freezing wind cutting into us as we sprinted toward the woods. The cold air stung my lungs as we tore through the woods, the shadows twisting and stretching around us. I could hear the creature behind us, its guttural growls and heavy, clawed steps crashing through the underbrush. It was faster than us, but it wasn't rushing. It was toying with us, letting us know it could catch us whenever it wanted. Where are we even going? Leah screamed, her voice cracking with panic. Anywhere but here, Max shouted back. Just keep running. I glanced over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature was visible now, weaving through the trees like it belonged there. Its glowing eyes locked on us, its twisted body moving unnaturally fast, limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. Don't look back, Olivia yelled. Just go. Nate tripped on a root, sprawling face first into the dirt. Nate, I shouted, skidding to a stop. He scrambled to his feet, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. I'm fine. Keep going. But we weren't fine. The creature was closing in, its growls morphing into a chilling, guttural laugh. It was enjoying this. Over there, Max yelled, pointing ahead. In the distance, I could just make out the silhouette of an old shed, half hidden by the trees. It wasn't much, but it was our only option. We sprinted for it, throwing ourselves through the door and slamming it shut behind us. The shed was dark and smelled of rot and mildew, but we didn't care. Max and I shoved an old workbench against the door, while Olivia and Leah frantically searched for anything we could use as a weapon. What the hell do we do now? Nate panted, his face pale and streaked with blood. No one had an answer. The growls outside grew louder, the creature circling the shed, its claws scraping against the wooden walls. It was so close I could feel the vibrations in the floorboards. We need to end this, Olivia said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. She held up the Ouija board, which she'd somehow grabbed during our escape. Are you insane? I snapped. That thing already hates us. And you want to use the board again? We don't have a choice, she shot back. If we summoned it, maybe we can send it back. Max hesitated, then nodded. She's right. It's the only chance we've got. Reluctantly, we all placed our hands on the planchette, our fingers trembling. The creature outside roared, the sound shaking the walls and filling the shed with a suffocating dread. Olivia took a deep breath. What do you want? She asked the board. The planchette moved instantly, as if the board was desperate to respond. Whoa, you. My blood ran cold. Why? Olivia asked, her voice barely a whisper. AYMENT. What does that mean? Leah cried, her eyes filling with tears. What payment? The creature slammed into the door, splintering the wood. Its claws punched through, raking at the air inside. We all screamed, backing away as it let out a guttural snarl. It's going to get in, Max yelled. The planchette moved again, faster this time. ONE. 1. Olivia repeated, her face pale. It wants one of us. The shed fell into a deafening silence, broken only by our ragged breathing and the creature's guttural growl outside. The word ONE seemed to hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. It wanted one of us, one life in exchange for the rest. No, Leah whispered, shaking her head violently. No way. We're not sacrificing anyone. It's not giving us a choice. Max snapped, his eyes darting to the splintering door. The creature had punched another hole through it, its glowing eyes visible as it peered in. We can't just pick someone, Nate shouted, his voice cracking. That's insane. Olivia was staring at the Ouija board, her expression unreadable. What if we don't have to? What are you talking about? I asked, panic lacing my voice. She looked up at us, her hands trembling. The board summoned it. Maybe if we reverse the summoning, send it back where it came from, none of us has to die. That's a big maybe, Max said, his voice full of doubt. What if it doesn't work? Then we're all dead anyway. Olivia snapped. Do you have a better idea? Another deafening crash came from the door. The workbench we'd pushed against it shifted, wood creaking under the force of the creature's blows. We didn't have time to argue. Fine, I said, grabbing the planchette. What do we do? Olivia closed her eyes, her lips moving as if she were reciting something silently. Then she opened them, her gaze fierce. We need to spell out return. Tell it to go back. Will that work? Leah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Olivia admitted. But it's the only shot we've got. We all placed our hands on the planchette, the creature's snarls growing louder, more furious. Slowly, we began to move it, spelling out the word return. The air around us seemed to thicken, a low, resonant hum filling the shed. The planchette started to resist, as if the board itself didn't want us to finish. Our fingers strained as we pushed it to the final letter. When we reached the N, the hum turned into a deafening roar. The candles we'd lit earlier in the cabin suddenly flared to life, their flames shooting impossibly high and bathing the room in an eerie orange glow. Outside, the creature howled, a sound so piercing it made my ears ring. The walls of the shed began to shake violently, dust and debris falling from the ceiling. Is it working? Nate yelled over the chaos. Before anyone could answer, the creature slammed into the door one final time. The workbench splintered, and the door flew off its hinges. The creature stood in the doorway, its glowing eyes locked on us, its mouth twisted into a snarl. But it didn't move. It seemed frozen, its body trembling as the roaring hum grew louder. The flames from the candles twisted and shot toward the creature, wrapping around it like living tendrils. The creature let out a horrible, bone-rattling scream, its body convulsing as the light consumed it. And then, with one final ear-splitting roar, it vanished, sucked into the air like smoke being pulled into a vacuum. The silence that followed was deafening. The flames snuffed out, leaving us in total darkness. For a long moment, none of us moved. None of us spoke. Did we? Leah finally whispered, her voice trembling. It's gone, Olivia said, her voice hollow. We sent it back. We slowly made our way out of the shed, our bodies shaking with exhaustion and fear. The woods were quiet now, the oppressive energy that had hung over them completely gone. As we stumbled back to the cabin, none of us said a word. The Ouija board sat abandoned in the shed, its surface charred and cracked. Whatever we'd summoned, whatever we'd sent back, it was over, or so we thought. We returned to the cabin in silence, the adrenaline draining from our bodies, leaving only the raw weight of what had just happened. No one dared speak. Words felt fragile, too small to contain the terror still gripping us. Max was the first to break the quiet as we stepped into the cabin, his voice shaky but trying to sound certain. We're burning it. The board, I asked, though I already knew the answer. He nodded. We can't leave it here. Can't risk whatever that was coming back. Olivia hesitated, her eyes darting toward the window as if expecting to see the creature's glowing eyes staring back. What if burning it makes things worse? Worse than what just happened? Max snapped. I'm not taking any chances. Leah was already gathering matches and an old can of lighter fluid from under the sink. None of us argued. We grabbed the board from the shed, careful not to touch it with our bare hands, and carried it to the fire pit outside. The forest was eerily calm now, the night holding its breath, watching. Max doused the board in lighter fluid and struck a match. The moment the flame touched the wood, a high-pitched scream tore through the air, like the board itself was alive. We stumbled back, our hands clamping over our ears, as the flames roared unnaturally high, licking the treetops. The fire burned an intense, brilliant blue before collapsing into smoldering ash in a matter of seconds. For a long moment, none of us moved. Is it gone? Leah whispered. I think so, Olivia said, though her voice betrayed her doubt. Max kicked at the ashes, scattering them into the dirt. It's gone. That thing's never coming back. We left the cabin that night, abandoning the trip entirely. The ride home was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts, replaying the nightmare over and over. I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd barely survived something far beyond our understanding. For weeks, I tried to move on. I avoided Max, Olivia, Leah, and Nate, unable to face the memories we shared. But late at night, I couldn't escape them. The glowing eyes, the inhuman growls, the way the board resisted as if alive. I thought it was over, until the dreams started. At first, they were vague. Shadows in the woods, faint whispers calling my name. But then they became clearer. I was back in the cabin, the Ouija board whole again, sitting on the table. The planchette would move on its own, spelling out the same word over and over, W-A-I-T. One night, I woke to the sound of growling outside my window. I didn't look, couldn't. I lay there, paralyzed, listening to the familiar, guttural sound as it circled the house. When the sun rose, there was nothing there, no footprints, no sign of anything unusual. But I knew better. The board was gone. The creature was gone. But whatever we'd unleashed that night in the cabin wasn't finished with us. It was waiting,